Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Seddon And Lacey's Comic Stash. And this week, it's war.
What is it
Civil
good for?
war.
What is it good for, Chris?
Absolutely nothing.
Well, don't give away our thoughts and feelings on the comics and movie that we watched, but yes, we'll get to that as whether it's worth anything or not. But yeah, you and me are possibly going to start a civil war with each other. Is this where Seddon and Lacey's comic stash becomes Seddon's stash and Lacey's stash? We shall see.
I'm taking the word comic as mine.
I'll take the word "and," even though it'll become obsolete, but I just want it. So you can never say "and" in a podcast ever again.
Fuck!
Curses.
So, before we go into our topic of the day, as is tradition, Seddon, what have you been up to in your corner? Your reading corner? Your
Got the
dank,
graphic
dirty
ready.
little corner?
After a failure on a previous episode, I remembered where it was, so I managed to actually get it ready. So yay me! One last thing to do, or one less thing to do in editing afterwards. But me and you've been chatting a bit offline, and I found Prime Reading. So I found with my Amazon Prime, I get some juicy free downloads. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff that's in the free download area is stuff that I actually own in paper copy. But when it's free and downloadable to your device, sometimes you get a little bit tempted in. And also, I took up a 2-month free subscription to Kindle Unlimited, which gets me 5 or 6 down. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6, but downloads a month and access to again a load of freebies. So let's just say my cup runneth over a little bit at the moment. But and funnily enough, one of the things that I have, and this isn't necessary for Reading Corner, but one of the things they had on the Kindle Unlimited deal was Civil War, which allowed me to give it a cheeky reread because I couldn't find my paper copy anywhere. So I'm guessing it's in the loft or something like that. But no, predominantly this week, what I've been doing in my Reading Corner, and this is available on Prime Reading, was reading World War Hulk, which is a story that I bought at the time and I really liked. It actually comes off the back of one of my favourite Hulk runs of all time, and I will say that potentially it's a little bit of a downturn in the quality, but it's just a big payoff to a lot of what Marvel were doing at the time, and I guess we'll touch on some of this in and around the discussion of Civil War and I guess why it exists and what it is. But Marvel were very much, and I guess they have been for a long time, but specifically very event heavy at this time, and their events were having very big impacts on the universe around it. So yes, a nice little revisit to World War Hulk, and it's whet my appetite for reading more Hulk again. I had started the Immortal Hulk, and then for some strange reason, I think because I put the iPad down, had stopped reading it for a little while. So I think that will be coming up. But yes, World War Hulk was my reading corner along with Civil War this week. And yourself?
So, Civil War, show prep as always.
Yeah.
But I finally went on to Comixology and had a little sneaky see what was on the freebie stuff, and found out that if I do it on the giant monitor that I have from work, it's easy enough to read. Not big on my phone.
I must admit, it hadn't crossed my mind, and that's what started like kind of our conversation about it, wasn't it? I hadn't thought about the reading it through your laptop. I mean, as I say, I read it through the iPad, or there are other devices, but Apple,
Yes.
please sponsor us. That actually, yes, that can make a hell of a difference. And I must admit, because I've been messing around with the Kindle Unlimited, I generally always use Comixology, and I've been playing with the Kindle Unlimited app, and that is also good. I would say that Comixology is designed a little bit better for reading comics, but Kindle Unlimited isn't far off. And my understanding is that Comixology in the not too distant future is going to be wrapped into the Kindle app anyway. So I think that might make a bit of a difference as well.
But yeah, so I went on there, scoured it for freebies, and saw that there were a fuck ton of freebies.
There are, aren't they?
Uh,
I mean, that's the beautiful thing for anyone watching this who watches this and goes, "Oh, I'm really not sure." We've done like where to start, and we'll carry on doing them. But I think this might actually be a bit of a kind of a premium for us, isn't it? Of finding like all these lovely little freebies that can either get us into characters or stories that maybe we haven't read, or stuff that we've read before that we want to reread. And as I say, I'd heartily recommend anyone who has a Prime account getting your ass in there now and getting some freebies.
yeah, so with the Comixology one, a lot of them are either issue zeros or issue ones of
Yeah.
things. So I read Batman Gotham Knights 1, which really, really enjoyed that, and am probably going to start looking at if there's like a trade or something of that run, because that was really good. And sort of, the first issue is like the main story, and then there's like a bonus bit at the end of which is just black and white Batman noir, and I'm like, yes, give me some of this because it's pretty as fuck. And the other one I read was New 52 Week 1, um, which not sure where it sits in the timeline of what's going on with the New 52, but it looks as though from the first issue that there has been an almighty fucking event that's just happened. There are lots of dead heroes, lots of heroes that have not been seen, and this seems to be a bit of a sort of a mystery of getting them back together. And a guy from the future turns up
Now,
who's a superhero.
I'm going to clarify because I now twig what one this is. So take out the new, it is 52 week one. And I can see why you say new 52 because obviously, and I think we've covered it on other shows where DC did their big reboot and they did the new 52 and then
Yeah.
they did 52 series. So this is quite a few years before New 52, and it is a
Okay.
weekly series called 52, and it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. It runs 52 issues long. It's fantastic. It comes off the back of well, it comes off the back of what a DC event. It leads into other DC events. It has a rotating cast of writers and artists, and I loved it at the time. It really was. I felt like it took me on a tour of the DC universe. For someone who wasn't so au fait with all the parts of the DC universe, it introduces you to a load of characters, a load of strings, and in theory, the whole DC universe of comic books at the time, kind of for that year, there was a mystery element to 52, and you'd see little bits weave in and out of others, but no, it is really good. It is very, very lore heavy. I will say that. I think having reading along at the time, it made me pick up a load of DC series, and I think maybe that's
Yeah.
what you'll find. This is one. This is one of those ones that is to get you to buy more, Chris. Which I know, that list is never expanding, but no, it is very good. I really liked it. As I say, it was a read at the time, and you didn't get weekly comics at the time, so it was a bit of a kind of experiment from DC side, and they do go on, and I think they do at least 2 more weekly series that come. I think the next one is called Countdown, which comes the year after, and I think there's one after that if I remember rightly. But this one, yeah, great writers, great artists abound, and yeah, it takes you on a tour of DC universe and introduces you to a lot of characters that maybe you haven't seen. And I think they did a lot with, let's say, some of the lesser characters. But yeah, really, really interesting. And I was going to say on Gotham Knights, I think Gotham Knights also is a bit of a rotating creative team, I think, because I think that first one is Warren Ellis, I think, isn't it? The first issue as a writer.
Let me get me app up.
Nice. If it is Warren Ellis, I love Warren Ellis, and I like the idea of Warren Ellis playing in the Bat universe. But I've got a feeling that over the series or over the continuing series, it's a way to allow, like, let's say, lots of different creators to come on and do specific stories about the Bat universe.
Why is it? It always opens it up at the last page when you've read something.
Yeah, and often I go, what did I read?
Yeah.
What was I reading?
Warren Ellis and Jim Lee.
I mean, again, like from a writer-artist pairing, you've got a superstar writer and the superstar artist, I guess there. So yeah, I can see why if you're going to launch a series, a Batman anthology series, you go with them boys to start it off.
Yes. So yeah,
Well,
that I'm
and it's free. So
intrigued in.
yeah, so I think that's again. I mean, like obviously, it's we always talk about the drug addict version of any hobby, don't we? And this is Amazon, and they do love a bit of drug addicts anyway, where they go, here you go, have the first hit for free, buy the rest. But yeah, so I mean, when I went through it as well, and I know you and I have earmarked a couple of bits for a future show that we're going to cover that
Yes.
were available in Prime Reading, but yeah, I think between the two, between Prime Reading and things like Kindle Unlimited, I think it does allow you. Kindle Unlimited is less first issues and more first trades. So they'll get you again. Still drug addicts as a concept. It's still the amount
Get you in on episode 1.
Well, it was weird the amount of them I was looking at where it sort of said like trade 1 free, trade 2 costs whatever, trade 3 costs whatever, trade 4 free, and you're going, oh, you really are, aren't you? Because now you're telling me I can read the first part and the fourth part for free if only I give you the money for number 2 and 3. So, but yeah, it does allow you to dabble, doesn't it? And I think that's one of the things. Whenever we've talked about this, where you've got your barriers to entry, is big barrier is not knowing where to start. Second big barrier is that there's so much of it. Well, this allows you to tiptoe in and go, I read that, I liked it, I want to read more, or I read that, it wasn't for me, let's shift on.
Yeah, because obviously the first video I went in was like, oh, let's see what Batmans there are. But then I've also sort of gone through it, and there's basically on what the cover is or the name of it, and gone, let's have a look and see what that is. Because there's a lot of sort of horror-y sort of stuff on there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's have a look at. We'll read for episode 1, see what it is, and then look at it from there. Because I'm using it because it's easier for me to do while I'm at work and stuff than taking stuff in with me. Because one thing that is on the list that's going to start reading is Nightfall 2, and I don't want to be having to lug that around with me.
Yeah.
So these are something that I can do.
Need a little trolley to carry that around, didn't you? Like, you put your bag over your shoulder and then drag your Nightfall 2 behind you in its own little trolley.
So yeah, so it's one of those. I'm going to start looking at it. Whether I'm going to start throwing money at it, I don't know. It all depends if something grabs me, because it's the same with like music. I like to actually own the physical product. That if the worst happens and the internet just disappears, where's what I've bought? Where's those songs that I like?
And also, don't get me wrong, I like free. I'm really pushing this as this is a really cost effective. And for us on the show, we joke about how we keep adding stuff to the list. And this is one of the problems with comic books, is that there's so many, and there's so many good ones and so many bad ones, but there's so many good ones that actually, you just feel like you're constantly adding to the list, and it does cost money. And we want to kind of do this, and it allows a non-cost prohibitive way to do it. But I'm like you, I also like to own physical media, and a large part of that is I want the people who have created something that I've enjoyed to get some money. And I know like in these Prime deals, obviously there's a kickback to the company and things like that, but I imagine it's very much like the Spotify model, where they probably get a lot less than if you bought the trade off the shelf or if you bought the singular issue. And much like a library back in the day, or right the way up to like music streaming and things like that. And for me, this is a try it for free and then put your hand in the pocket and buy it if you liked it, because I think that's the way you kind of support the industry.
Or my thing with music more is listen to the albums on Spotify, but when they come to near your city or town, go see them live and buy a T-shirt.
Yeah, get the merch.
That's where they
make all their money.
Make the real money.
Yeah, the kickback isn't to the record company, or in the comic book case, the publisher. But like if I want to read more of something, they're only going to write it and print it if it's selling, aren't they? So I think that's a big part of it for me. So use Prime, use these services to get your teasers and your tasters, and then from that, if you like it, get more. And as you say, there's a really varied range on there, isn't there? There's your Marvel superheroes, there's your DC superheroes, but I know they cover a lot of Image. I don't think there's much Dark Horse on there, but I think they have their own,
No.
or for a while they had their own app. But once you've kind of burnt through all the stuff that I think are the obvious ones for you, like you say, automatically you went to go, what Batman are there? It is there's other stuff. You might as well try it. It's free, and you might find something you love. So yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's Apple sponsoring us now. That's Amazon. All we need is someone to send us off into space, and we've covered the three big bloody companies out there, haven't we? Oh, and Disney. But we're talking about a Disney movie later. Yeah, I guess it's a Disney movie now. I can't remember if it was Disney at the time, but
yeah, I think this was one of the first ones of the mouse money.
We are slaves to the corporate fucking merry-go-round, aren't we? God, I just swore. Apologies, everyone. I'm trying to swear less.
Well, 20 minutes. It's a good hit.
Again, that's better than I did on the Friday night show, isn't it? I think I made it 14 on that one, but
exactly. So we will go into our topic of the week, which is Civil War. So for how we're going to work this is we are going to break down the book, break down the film, and then we will have the most prominent of all questions.
Then we'll fight.
Whose side are you on?
Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? I mean, it's odd, isn't it? We'll go with comic book first, but obviously a lot of the movies and those characters are based on comic books. I do wonder whether this is one where a lot of people might not realise that Civil War is a comic book. They probably, because the way it was portrayed potentially with the movie is that it's a Captain America story, but no, Civil War as a comic book is a standalone 7-issue limited series. And I'm going to come back to the term standalone in a minute, actually, before I go too far away from that. That was released by Marvel. And it was universe-wide. It does focus heavily on a civil war between Cap and Iron Man, but this not only has pretty much most of the Marvel Universe hero characters in it, but at the time, and I've put them down below, they're the 7 covers to the series. I'm sure they will appear, but I'll probably put some graphics in because this was pretty much line-wide. So in the Civil War 7 issues, you get a story, but pretty much every single monthly comic book that was being released at the time had Civil War-esque stories in it. So you found out much more about how the Civil War impacted, let's say, Spidey, let's say the Avengers at the time, and things like that. And there's I think it's probably the same trade dress on the trade paperbacks, but you can see they have this kind of top half picture, bottom half white with the term Civil War. Well, all of the monthly comics changed their covers to look like that as well. So if you went into a comic book shop at the time and you weren't interested in Civil War, tough shit for you, because pretty much everything on the shelf, certainly everything Marvel, looked like this. So they had it was a real big kind of concerted universe-wide impacting storyline, and they really went big guns on this as a crossover. This was Marvel for I'm going to say 7 months, but there were a lot of delays in the publication of it, so probably closer to 10 months by the time it actually got finished.
Okay. See, I came to this obviously late, because as with most things, I'm late to the party, fashionably late, as they say.
Yep.
Obviously saw the film first and went, ooh, I like this concept. And then was one of those of, when I got out of the film, when my mates went, yeah, you need to read the book of it. It's different, but the same.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And it's always just sat there on one of those, on my list of, I should pick that up at some point.
Yeah.
Finally got round to it. But yeah.
As I'm converting you to full Marvel boy, you finally got round to it.
But yeah, it's, from what I remember, it didn't come out much before the film, though, did it? Because the film was 2016.
And this was published 2006 into 2007. So we've got a 10-year gappage there.
Okay. I think it might just be my version, because my version says printed 2015. So it might just
Yeah,
be that the version I've got was done just because the film was coming out then,
yeah, it probably
which has
was kind
made
of
me
a movie tie-in. Like, here we go, we can make a bit more cash money, these boys. But yeah,
reissues. But yeah, that's it. That's all I thought. I was like, it wasn't too much before it. So I swear that my one says issue date of 2015. I was like, it's quite a quick turnaround
oh
for
god,
being
yeah. I
into it.
mean, I'm not saying they can't turn things around this quick, and I'm not entirely sure that we might not see a bit more of that symbiosis between the movies and the comic books, where they might actually plan out a movie story and then write the comic book to go alongside it. But no, at this point, yeah, you are looking at. I mean, I think this is one of the closest ones in time, certainly from what they were doing at the time. I mean, you look at kind of the Thanos saga being based off the Infinity Gauntlet, and you're going back a lot further, and a lot of the stuff they touch on those movies tend to be considered more classic, probably 20 odd plus years ago. But I
Yeah,
think they'd found their feet a little bit in the cinema world. So yeah, they were coming a bit closer to publication dates at this point. But yeah, no, we've got about a 10-year gap between the two. I was quite surprised, having read the comic at the time, to see that they were going to, one, make this a movie, but two, make it a singular movie. Because as I say, like for me, from the comic book publication side of it, this was all encompassing. This was the big event at the time, and I guess I thought that maybe it would be done over a few movies, or it would be the end point of the series, or something like that.
yeah,
But yeah, I guess we are buckling away a little bit from the comic book here. So let's go right back to the beginning of Civil War, and I guess the first fundamental big difference that people could and would notice is what actually causes the Civil War. And in this, it's a tragic event. There is a team called the New Warriors, and over publication history, the New Warriors kind of was a bit of a 90s thing. You know, it was all about young heroes. There was a dude with a skateboard. You know, it's very much of its time.
yeah,
But what they've tended to do with the New Warriors concept over the years is reinvigorate it, but it be almost that team that reflects what's going on in society at the time. And what was going on in society at the time was a lot of reality TV shows. So just
yeah,
before this, there'd been a New Warriors limited series, which had been about them on the road, filming them being heroes on the road, doing things, and generally fighting Z-list villains, muggers, and things like this. So they were portrayed as a bit of a kind of a joke and a bit of a satirical look at what's going on in the world of reality TV. But in here, they are filming an episode of their show, and they do take down, let's say, a nest of villains. Much
yeah,
again, probably Y-list villains, but there is one villain in there called Nitro. And Nitro over the years has appeared in a few stories here and there. You know, it's been a bit of a in Punisher, Cap, things like that. And his power is to do explodey things, but it's never really done anything too dramatic at this point. But during the course of the fight, he explodes. And unfortunately, he explodes in a small town right near a school, and many people die. And you know, this is our catalyst, isn't it? This is where you
yeah,
kind of go. Heroes generally haven't, maybe the impacts of what they do and the negative impacts and can come with it probably haven't been explored much along the way, or certainly not to this extent. But it drops you right in and says heroes messed up, or arguably did they mess up? I mean, would it have happened anyway? Would Nitro
yeah,
just gone off? But heroes probably messed up. What does the world do when a load of innocent lives are lost at the expense of, or at expense because of the actions of a superhero team?
yeah. Is that it's the first time that any of them, have, from what I sort of know of, very much go of this. You know what happens 5 minutes after the fight.
Yeah, yeah. and
You know,
and
it's
and as I
all
say, the impacts of a fight, because generally it's all like, yes, the bad guy's done, lives were saved, but this one kind of went, the bad guy's done, lives might have been saved, but lives were lost.
yeah. It it's that whole sort of conflict of the innocence in war. It's the first time that anyone's really looked at that as an idea. You know, so when we speak of real wars in the real world, you know, you get how many of enemy troops were killed. Well done, you did your job. But there's not ever the how many innocents were caught
And
in the crossfire.
and it really kind of hammers in, doesn't it? I mean, like it's very key. It shows you that there's a school right next to it, and one
Yeah,
of the big premises is that school children were killed. I think they put the number at about 600 people die, inclusive of school children, and just as a clarifier, inclusive of the new warriors, the people who were having the fight as well. So their heroes are damaged and killed within this as well.
yeah. So coming into it, I had no idea who most of these were because I'd never read the New Warriors. So I didn't. I was like, I got the idea of it. I was like, are they trying to do like a Jack? Because see the
Yeah,
timing of it. I was like, is it like Jackass where it's like,
yeah.
oh look, we've got powers. Look what we can do, or whether it was sort of a, you know, following, keeping up with the Kardashian style, day in the life of superheroes, and oh look what we do.
When with
But
with those new warriors, Chris, I mean, like the cast that's in this one is slightly different. It's changed a little bit in the limited series beforehand, but there's a guy called Night Thrasher who was the leader. He's still there. There's Namorita, who's the cousin of Namor, and she was an original. And the other big kind of original character in there is Speedball, and Speedball was he got a limited series many years ago, and it was very much kind of a comic for kids. You know, he was a young lad. His powers is that he has like these like kind of weird bubbles around him, and he can bounce around. And he also can't kind of be hurt while he's around the bubbles, but he's pretty useless. And he was a bit of a joke. And then in the New Warriors, and again, like, they were young heroes, but most of them are considered a bit of a joke. But the series kind of expands on that, and they kind of grow over time. But in this iteration, yes, you're back to, as you say, the kind of jackass, like, let's go and do something silly, let's film it. It plays up their comedy side or
yeah,
their useless side a little bit more.
but yeah, it's that sort of, there is your main sort of reason for what has to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and without going too far forward into it, and obviously what we're going to go over when we do the film, this is the main difference between the two.
Yeah.
But there's a reason there's a main difference, which I will go more into when we talk about the film side of it. But this is, as I said earlier, this is the first time you see that what happens after they've done the big hero thing. You know, you see it in loads of stuff where, oh, the bad guy's defeated, but they're standing in around masses of rubble. And
The DC Universe movies are particularly a big one for me on this, is that they cause such devastation that I feel like one of the real beats that they get wrong is they never actually, well, I say they never do, I guess at the beginning of Batman, Superman they do, but they don't touch on how catastrophic the stuff they do is. And again,
yeah,
I mean, that's probably more indicative of the people who are making it, who don't give a fuck about what's going on around it. They're just like, that looks cool, so let's do that. But yeah, you know, it's a smart way, isn't it? I mean, Mark Miller, the
yeah,
writer, I mean, at this point, he has written some really kind of acclaimed stuff. He is probably the top dog in comic book writing at this point when he comes into this, and I think they pretty much let him do anything he wanted. I think Brian Michael Bendis is just behind him in the Marvel hierarchy at this point, and I think they were going much like we've talked about in the Vision episode with the sort of stuff they allow Tom King to do now. I think they were just basically saying to Mark Miller, if you've got a cool story that you want to tell, you go and tell it. And the other writers, you know, they go off to Marvel retreats. The other writers will fall in line and they will write stories based off of this premise. But this is a
yeah,
very big premise. I feel like it's something he probably thought about at some point and went, wouldn't it be great to, one, see the heroes fight each other, and two, see the repercussions of what it is that the heroes do. What does that actually mean?
yeah,
What would that mean in a real world? Which I think this is what it's trying to lean into a lot more, isn't it?
yeah. Um, is as I say, is that first sort of time we see this done in any sort of form. Obviously, you get Tony's then a ceremony, and a mum of one of the dead kids,
Yeah,
is there and blames him for what has happened, even though he wasn't there. But he is the picture of a superhero.
It's quite
Is
cutting, isn't it? The way she
yeah,
treats him. She sort of says, "Look, you're the millionaire playboy pin-up version of this. It's you and your sort that have made it seem attractive and acceptable to everyone else to do this, regardless of whether they should or they shouldn't." And you know, again, one of the big premises of this series is coming off the back of the world we're in at the time with the reality TV is fame, that kind of
yeah,
clamoring desire for fame, but actually showing no regard or responsibility for what you do with those powers or what you do with that fame. And yeah, she really goes at him, like, and you know, like weirdly enough, like I remember at the time, and it really didn't read like this time, but I remember at the time because I was so indoctrinated to superhero comic books that I remember
yeah,
reading that scene and going, well, she's going to be a villain. She's gonna have orchestrated all of this, and this isn't real, and this is a stitch up, and all this sort of thing. But yeah, reading that scene back now, I preferred it a lot more this time that I'd switched off comic book boy brain of going, well, that's
yeah.
going to be Doctor Doom or something like that.
But yeah, it's that thing of like, as you said, usual comic book trope would be that they'd end up being the big bad,
Yeah,
but obviously aren't in this.
still time. You know, we are what 16 years later in publication. There's still time for to demask and be Doctor Doom. I'm
Heel
sure.
turn.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And you know, like in and around this, I mean, post the kind of Stanford incident, and I say the Stanford incident because Stanford's where this explosion happens. You get, we talk about seeing the stuff you don't normally see. You get to see all or most of the heroes that you're going to see as this series go on actually attend the site, don't you? And you hear
Yeah,
them having conversations, I guess, like we would in our office if. I don't know. There's a fire alarm. They're kind of all kind of just standing around going, "Oh, what do we do?" Like, and I think you get to see some conversation pieces that you don't normally expect to see, and you never kind of really get elsewhere. And it starts to kind of layer in that there's different thoughts and opinions about what happened here, why it happened. Oh, I think they all think it's bad, but kind of what the solution for is it? And as you say, teamed in with
yeah,
this kind of confrontation between Tony and the mother of one of the dead children. Um, you start to see the kernels of what's to come, which is public opinion starting to turn on heroes because cutting and biting on the media. The media loves a sensational story, and I'm not saying that again. This is not a tragedy, but they're looking for their angle, and their angle is the new warriors are baby killers. Effectively, you know,
yeah,
they went out there and they killed babies, and you start to see Tony kind of really grab onto. Again, I think it's the guilt he feels from that confrontation, as to there's got to be a better and different way to do this.
yeah. And this is where you start getting the political side kick in, where they go to Tony and go, "There's got to be registration, and you work for the government. You are, yeah, it's Avengers still. You can still be the Avengers,
Yeah.
but you're not free. You're not freelance. You don't go off and do what the fuck you want
Yeah.
when you want."
It's the Superhuman Registration Act is the core tenant, isn't it? And
Yeah,
it is that everyone will, if you are going to do this, you almost have to be licensed, don't you? And I don't mean like a kind of
yeah,
franchise. You're not like a McDonald's franchise or something like that, but you need to give your identity or your details, I guess, like to a large degree, so you can be held responsible for your actions, but also that you can be governed. And of course, like it's been a trope in superheroes for many years that some people's identities are secret for multiple different reasons. But that act of heroism by a random stranger as a theory, rather than I am Michael and I have gone out there and saved someone. And yes, you know they want to, and now you said a government. I mean, that's one of the interesting sort of kind of wrinkles here, isn't it? Because it leans into which government, because predominantly these heroes are United States based,
yeah,
and of course, for those who've only seen the movies, you have Shield. So Shield are a huge intelligence division, ostensibly of the US government, but has almost, I guess, become a beast of its own. But this
yeah,
being administered to by Shield. a body that is run by Nick Fury ish, a
who
bit
you
ish.
don't see.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's
Because
all
yeah, yeah, and you know, like Tony is a big proponent of this, isn't he? He
yeah,
thinks this is the way. He thinks that this is very much the future of superheroing. From a to avoid talking about the Civil War movie, but from a movie connection, very much some of the stuff that I think they touched on in the Age of Ultron movie, where he talks about putting the Ultron robots around the world as that kind of defense mechanism. Like it
yeah,
is, you know, a lot of the DNA of Tony Stark in the movies is from this period of comic books.
yeah. Um, Obviously, in the press conference when he announced it, Spidey demasks.
Which from a comic book side was huge. Like
Yeah,
this series, a lot of the ends of issues end on big things. Now, weirdly enough, those things are probably and that's one of the things I'm quite interested in, I guess, when we do a wrap up of it, of how some of the big story beats hit for you, because they were massive at the time, but probably not so massive anymore because they've been done, and they've been done in the comics a few times since then, and they've been done in the movies since then as well.
yeah,
So maybe they don't hit, but I mean, this was a massive thing, like a really big thing in the comics at the time was Peter Parker. He had pretty much been the biggest secret identity boy. I mean, that had been wrapped into his stories for 40 plus years. Is that he never wanted anyone to know who he was because he didn't want Aunt May to be targeted. He didn't want Mary Jane to be targeted
yeah,
because one of the few times someone found out who he was, which is the Goblin, which is going back really, really, really far back. He kills Gwen Stacy because of their connection together, and you know that had always been a massive tenet of his character of going, no, I need to protect those around me whilst I'm saving others.
yeah. 'Cause some of them, obviously, they have are very open on who they are. So Stark is very obvious with it. Cap's
Yeah,
very obvious with the fact that he's Steve Rogers. You know, there are a few of them that are quite happy to do this, but then there's others, as you say, like someone like Spider Man. They don't
no,
they don't unmask. There's no knowing who they are. There's that whole there is that edge of secrecy about them.
but you know he does, he doesn't he? Like Tony, I guess say gets Peter on side, and Peter does. You know, like this is, and I think maybe this is where I wonder for you whether it has the same impact, because I was reading the other stuff at the time. So in the Spidey Monthly,
Mm.
you get a lot of interaction between him and Tony about how Tony convinces him, because
Yeah,
this is a big thing. Whereas in this, because this is, I guess, a central core event one, he just kind of does it.
turns
That's
up and
how it
does it.
felt to me
Yeah,
reading it. And funnily enough, I keep going back to like the connections with the movie universe, but um, a little bit before this is where Peter and Tony start to get a bit of a relationship, and then it kind of leads into this. And I think for those who've watched the movies, there's a core kind of Tony and Peter father son relationship, isn't there? And all of
yeah,
that. That didn't happen in the comics until about 2005. They'd never really had any connection whatsoever, but around 2005, that's when they start to layer it in. So that all comes from kind of just before this story and onwards.
yeah. So that's sort of the end of the first issue in it. They've got that's
Yeah,
the big
that's the big
moment on
reveal.
there.
Although you do have, and it is, oh God, kick me up the arse if I get this wrong, but in issue one, you do get to see Cap take the other side, because it is issue one where he is on the Shield helicarrier, isn't he? And they're having a conversation, him and Maria Hill, about the Superhero Registration Act. And I think there's, almost smuggy like Maria Hill is like, well, kind of, you'll be on board, won't you? And then you get that moment where he goes, no,
Yeah,
that's.
I think that's the first bit of episode issue two.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah. Well, I'm not too far off then. Yeah.
No, I
Which
think because at the end of the first one, it's still very much there's that murmurs of people not being happy about the idea of it, but Spidey's done it.
Yeah.
And then you go into the second issue, which is where you then start the real break of who is and who isn't.
And it's
Starts coming in.
I wanted to kind of particularly touch on that cat part purely because one, you know, you do get it in the movie, and we'll come to that kind of the cat fighting the government agents bit. But this is where I really wanted to tap into the art of this series, because I think this action scene, and don't get me wrong, issue 1, and I think all throughout this the art is fantastic, but I think this kind of action scene is Steve McNiven, who's the penciler, who was a superstar penciler at the time, but not very quick, and that's what caused a lot of the delays for this coming out. But very, very superheroific. You know, he's probably the successor to Jim Lee in theory at the time. But my God, that boy knows how to draw a cat fight, and including that amazing scene where Cap is on top of a plane as he's hiked it out of the helicarrier, and it is fantastic. But yes, Cap draws his line in the sand, doesn't he? He says, "No, I am anti-registration."
And so it's the one thing you just mentioned there is the art. I will take a delay when it looks this fucking pretty.
Do you know what? I think I agree. However, I do remember at the time it feeling really painful because it was the whole Marvel universe that was being delayed. You know, you were kind of going, "Oh shit, they can't start telling. They can't, like, say if it's like the Amazing Spider-Man comic book monthly, it can't go any further because if you publish any of the issues of that, we know what happens at the end of this story, and you know it did cause some issues. But yes, it is bloody beautiful.
But, you know, that's why I wait and have the whole lot in one go and then don't have to worry about delays.
That is one of the big advantages to reading things in collected editions, is that yes, you don't have to go through any of that.
But yeah, it is this point where obviously we get the line in the sand drawn and we start seeing who's on whose side. So you got the Fantastic Four. There reads all for it. The rest of them, we start getting that sort of differential between
less for it is how I describe it.
Yeah, less for it. Johnny Storm gets done over outside of a club and is hospitalised.
And again, it was really interesting, wasn't it? Because again, I think it touches on that, like how the world reacts.
Yeah.
And there starts to become a lot of vocal anti-superhero feeling. And as you say, like there's a nightclub scene where he is just being Johnny Storm, something he'd have been revered for previously, where he turns up with a lass on his arm and goes to the front of the queue, and someone in the queue kind of probably annoyed because they didn't want to be in the queue says, "Why do you get to go to the front of the queue, baby killer?" And then the crowd, the mob mentality kind of gets up, doesn't it? And what started for something else, probably a selfish, I don't want someone to be going into the queue before me, turns into him getting an absolute fucking shoe-in, doesn't it? And then being hospitalised off the back of it.
And you do start getting, this is where you're getting a lot more sort of characters sort of coming in that I wasn't massively au fait with or had a lot of dealings with. So this was sort of from this point onwards where you start getting the introductions of different people that I didn't know.
Did they peak and tweak your interest at all, though? Was it kind of they appeared on panel and you went, "Oh, do you know what? I'd like to know more." Because I think that's probably with these big event comics.
Yeah.
One of the things that they hope for, isn't it, is that maybe a character that you didn't know much about before, maybe visually or just something they do in the issue, makes you go, "Oh, I would like to read a series about them." Or
I think the problem with this one is that because so much does happen and there are so many of them, no one gets a moment to really shine.
Yeah, and I guess
a lot of it is predominantly your big name players are the ones that get.
Yeah, I guess those other ones were given a bit of time to breathe and shine, maybe in the side stories. Yeah, so I think you're probably right.
But yeah, this obviously carries on with them just getting more and more split up between the two.
It belts at quite a pace at this point, doesn't it? Like when
Yeah.
you're going between issue 2 and 3, you kind of have Registration Act, shaky hands, Iron Man declaring, "Don't worry about Cap. You know, we'll kind of take care of him with him, Reed, and Hank Pym." And then by the
Yeah.
time you get into issue 3, you feel like a degree of time has passed. You know, like the press has really heated up on Heroes, and Cap and his crew are out there still doing what superheroes used to do, which is taking down bad guys, but it seemed to be a lot more underground and in the night, and those barriers between the walls have got very, very thick very, very quickly at this point.
And this point, this is where you've got the split where obviously Cap has his secret Avengers, and they're trying to have normal lives.
Yeah.
And normal sort of things like Cap's a mole detective.
Yes.
One's a fireman.
Yeah.
One's a teacher.
Some great faux moustaches on some of these scenes, isn't there? The facial hair and the haircuts are immense.
Yeah, so you've got Hercules, Falcon, Daredevil, Luke Cage as the sort of predominant ones that are a team Cap, and getting their new orders from Nick Fury. Who, I don't think we actually ever see Fury, do we?
No, we don't. He'd been out of the Marvel universe for a little while. He had disappeared. I won't go into why, because we'll probably maybe cover that at a later date in another series at another point.
And then, so yeah, that's how we get that. The one set that I'm surprised we don't see at all, X-Men.
There is a bit. You have Tony goes to meet.
Oh yeah, you go to see Jean, and then
Emma Frost, isn't it?
Yes.
And I almost said Emma Stone then, because I've been a prep for the top 5 worst movies. And the X-Men pretty much remain neutral, don't they? They say no, nothing to do with us. You know, like we've got kind of our own mutant thing going on here. There is some historical reference for that. So many years ago, and I think I talked about it briefly of rereading Inferno, but around that time, one of the big premises in the comic books, and this come out at the back of Fall of the Mutants, is something called the Mutant Registration Act. Yeah. So the idea is that mutants would have to register. So mutants would have to register their powers, and no other superheroes were. And it was a big X-Men-y, mutant-y story. But the thing that they touched on a few times, which Chris Claremont was so good at doing, is going, well, why are the mutants treated differently? And because they're treated differently, that's why they're a bit narky about it. And of course, now there's this Superhuman Registration Act, and Tony kind of goes to see which side they'll be on. And the mutants are pretty much, well, fuck off. Where were you when the Mutant Registration Act was happening?
Yeah.
You weren't interested when it was just going to be impacting us. So why would we get involved in this? And as far as we're concerned, we're not superhumans. We're mutants. So it doesn't impact us. Like, come at us if you dare, to a degree.
Yeah.
And so they are kind of put off in a little to the side pocket. They do touch on it during the X-Men comics at the time. It does come up. But yeah, they were taken off the table a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and the other one that, again, was one that I was surprised wasn't there was Strange. Or he turns up that he very quickly goes, I want none of it, and then fucks off.
Well, and for context, like, Strange is not a big character at this point in comic books. Strange is not the Strange you see in the movies. Like, Strange pretty much has been... he's had a load of failed solo series along the way. He's rarely used... and this is, I think, probably for me, the first point I remember them starting to reintroduce him to become the Strange that ultimately we see integrated into so much. In fact, in a couple of Marvel events time, he becomes very front and center, and that's why he's a big character in there now. But no, he was kind of a bit of an afterthought at this point in the Marvel universe anyway. So it was just nice to see him on a page, to be honest. Like, for me at the time anyway.
Well, it's because obviously after doing 1602 and that sort of being around sort of a little bit before this, obviously that I thought that Strange was still in the
I
pantheon,
think
and
I think Gaiman probably liked him, and probably him using it in that probably reminded people, oh yeah, he's quite cool, isn't he? Like he's got
yeah.
some sort of cachet behind him. But no, he wasn't. He wasn't front and center at this part.
So
We do again around this part of the story where you say people have divided off, and they have divided off at this point. There is a sort of stark contrast in the art style. So everything like the Tony group are doing is in the daylight, all bright and colourful, isn't it? And you know, like
yeah,
they're formulating the next steps, the things that they think the heroes should do that should come off of this. Whereas everything Cap's crew is doing is often at night, and you do get a storyline bit where it's, and I can't remember what it's called at the time. I think it's Patriot is called at the time, but it's the Cap analogy from the Young Avengers, and you see him kind of doing a bit of crime fighting of an evening, like they do, but
yeah,
he is then chased down by the Shield, basically, and you see that you see a very authoritarian side of this, don't you? Where for them doing what they used to think as heroic and what was usual, they're going to get locked down by the police, for want of a
yes,
better term, and they're not going to be treated maybe with the kindnesses that they used to be. Like they're going to be taken down hard, and imprisoned. Now, not to
yeah,
go into kind of the prison part of it, but you see them being carted away in superhero handcuffs. So the world has
yeah,
changed. If you are not registered, you are not welcomed by the world
yeah.
at this point.
I think this is the bit where there's Tony's realised that they're doing this on the side heroing, and has the fake emergency at the disused power plant, and we get Thor, or what we think is Thor.
Yeah,
We
and
get weird robot clone Thor.
when you talk about like big moments, and again, I think big moments that probably don't hit hard now. So at this point, Thor's been dead for a while. They
Yeah,
finished Thor. They run a story where Ragnarok happens, and
yeah,
Thor's not been seen for a while. So he's kind of out of play. He's off the table and has been off the table for, and I say a while, probably only a couple of years, but that's a long time in comic book publishing for a big character like that. So yeah, he's very much gone. So this was one of their big moments. This is one of their big punch. I remember the internet blowing up. They talked about like things that would make the internet melt down. Well, the first one was Parker revealing his identity. The second one
yeah,
was Thor coming back, and this was one of their big essential moments. And of course, before you know it's not Thor, it's Thor coming back, and Thor takes Tony's side, which is
yeah.
a huge thing. A really nice kind of fight scene, wasn't it? As you say, they trick
Pretty,
they trick
so pretty.
Cap's group to kind of go to this place, and do you know what? Like while we talk about when we get to the whose side are you on, when you look at I guess positives, is you could easily look at this and go, oh, what a sneaky bastard Tony is, like stitching up his mates and getting them there. But also, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's to try and do it where there are no innocents. You know, like
Yeah,
there are points here where you feel like um, that the hope is that if you got them all together, they could have a conversation. But
yeah.
actually, all of their egos, and I think at this point, specifically Cap's ego, it doesn't want to have a
It's too much.
conversation. Yeah, yeah, like he is no, you kind of no, fuck off. We're fighting our way through this, and as I say, this leads to these battles, and yeah, as you say, Thor appears, and Thor is quite a game changer on the battlefront, isn't he? You know, like he is a bloody big god with lots of powers and lightning and stuff like that. So the Cap side are. And as I said, I'm going to swear less, but I think there's no way I could describe this. They start shitting it a bit, don't they? They go,
Yeah.
God, Thor's here. We're in trouble. Let's get out. Like, let's get away
Yeah.
from this quick, smart.
And I think the giant one, what was his name?
Goliath.
Goliath, yeah. They obviously Thor takes him down and kills him.
And Thor takes him down. And again, this was your big shock moment. So the two big shock moments for this issue was Thor appears, and of course, he's Thor. There's nothing to necessarily immediately intimate that he's not Thor. However, something is rotten in Denmark when Thor runs a lightning bolt right the way through Goliath. He wasn't a big character. Well, no, he was big, but he wasn't a big character in the Marvel Universe. So he was certainly, oh God, this sounds terrible, but sacrificable. Although I think subsequently people were like, oh, bloody hell, he was my favourite character. Why did you kill him? But I guess you get that whenever you do it. But yeah, a big moment. Thor kills Goliath. And for all intents and purposes, the god Thor has chosen Sony's side. He's gone too far. Possibly like, again, allegory for the new warriors caused an explosion which killed someone. And so they registered superhumans. And now these registered superhumans actually just killed someone. And so actually does registration stop the bad things that can happen. But yeah, you get a lovely fight between Cap and Tone, the earliest one at this point as well, before kind of Thor starts kicking off, and yeah, beautiful art around this point. You said earlier about you'd accept some delays to see this over and over again. I think that's why the comic book world was quite forgiving of the delays at this point, because these are spectacular.
And this is a massive turning point, because this is where people start switching sides.
Yes,
Spidey goes. This is the point where Mrs. Fantastic Four and Human Torch officially leave.
One of the things
because they're moany, but they don't up and leave. This point is where they fuck off.
Well, one of the things you said earlier, like the Fantastic Four are, I mean, Tony and Steve Rogers are the main two here, aren't they? But I felt the people who kind of shared screen time that probably had big impactful moments. The Fantastic Four, and particularly Mr. Fantastic being one of them. And Mr. Fantastic goes balls deep into this, doesn't he? And he's been portrayed for a long time in the comic books at this point of often getting caught up in the science. He's got a very big brain. Like, he's trying to make the world and the universe a better place, and sometimes to the detriment of the attention of the people around him. But he is like constantly kind of formulating plans of what they can do, like what they can do better, what they can do differently. And you see the strains of that on his marriage, not only because he is distant, but because fundamentally they don't agree. But you kind of see that Sue has stuck around, I think, for the love of her husband and her family, not wanting her family. But yeah, this is where you start to go, oh my God, no, this is too much. And to a large part because, as you said, like we see that Thor does this killing, but actually that's where we start to get the reveal that this isn't Thor. What Tony and predominantly Reed has done is they've cloned to a degree Thor into a robotic version of it. And for Sue and for Spidey, and there are other reasons for Spidey that are more put out in his own comic book, but they start to go, no, this isn't right. We are not on the right side here. And by the same token, on the Cap side, you start to get some of the characters from there going, like, for a combination of we don't want to live in the sewers anymore, but also to a degree of going, no, like, we didn't want to be criminals. We didn't want to be outlaws. We didn't want it to go, and someone's died. This isn't fun anymore. This isn't what it's supposed to be. But yeah, you get these kind of moments of people going, no, I'm not, which I guess you get, don't you? I mean, we're all human beings, and I'm sure, someone puts someone in front of us and we go, oh, this is the way I feel about it. But as you read and learn more or experience it more, you might change your mind.
Yeah. We get 42 gets mentioned now.
Yeah.
And the creation of the Supermax Beyond Realm Shadow Zone prison.
Yeah.
And see, this is another one of Reed's great inventions.
Yeah. And very much kind of laid out as this is a really good idea, because we don't want unregistered superhumans being out there and a danger to others and themselves. But also, in a large part, these are people we know and we like, so we don't want it to be horrific. We also don't want them to be open to attack by villains, and we want to keep the general public safe. So let's create, as you say, a kind of a super max prison outside where these people can go. And Yeah. It didn't look, when you visually get to see it, it didn't look like it was a nice country club prison for
No,
your friends and family, did it? It does look
no.
pretty grim, to be fair.
Um,
And
Punisher
a
then
number
turns
of
up.
Cap's boys, are in there already, aren't they? They have been
Yeah,
captured. There are people in this prison.
yeah. And villains are in there as well, which that will come back to later.
Yeah.
Punisher turns up and is on Cap's side, but just turns up being very Punisher, as you'd expect. Comes in, kills some people, saves Spidey.
There's a nice little kind of combo moment here, isn't it? Where that whose side are you on? So around this time, we see that Shield and predominantly Maria Hill has decided that the heroes are maybe not enough, or the
Yeah,
heroes as we think they are, to police this superhuman registration act that it is, and that they're maybe not as controllable because of people like, as I say, Sue Storm defecting and things like that. So she starts to go and get some of the worst villains that there are in the Marvel universe and pretty much kind of put them on contracts and says, come and work for us. We need you to do these sort of things. And as you say, partially this is them hunting down Spidey when he leaves. But that would, I think, be particularly damning on one side of the argument. So I think that's why Punisher is put on the other side, because Punisher does not agree with the Superhuman Registration Act. Kind of weirdly stalks around in the shadows a lot until he assists Spidey and then gets himself into Cap's group. And there are a lot of people in Cap's group who are saying, "The Punisher?" Question
yeah,
mark. Is this
yeah,
what we've become, where we would let like a kind of a homicidal maniac in here because we are that desperate? So you kind of see where both sides maybe make dark and moral choices, because the message that they think is important maybe is so important that they're willing to waver a little bit on what they'd normally do.
yeah. Because obviously with Tony's lot, he's got what Venom, um,
Bullseye,
Bullseye,
Lady Deathstrike, lots of people who are well known for killing.
yeah, and some of them not just killing, but killing lots for fun.
Yeah, for
In
fun.
Venom's
Yeah,
case,
I think that's very much. I think they pick their villains wisely here. Of going, these are, and weirdly enough, the future of comic books tells us differently. These are irredeemable characters, except for a number of them have now had series where they've been portrayed as a hero. But they are irredeemable characters. They are the worst, the people that you should never cheer for because they've just murdered people for shits and giggles along the way.
yeah. Punisher is given a job by Cap to go in to get the plans.
Yeah, from the Baxter
Um,
building, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah, he's kind of like, I know, I can get in there. I've been there before. I've got a way, and I think that's, I talk about like kind of the dark side of what Cap's willing to do at this point, or what Cap's side is willing to do at the point, and I think that is Punisher's unique selling point. Like Cap
yeah,
wants to get these prisoners out of this 42 prison, and they can only do it if they get these plans from the Baxter building. They don't want a full frontal assault because they know that won't work. They know that they're under their numbers, and Punisher has the unique ability to be able to go and do it for him.
yeah. It's send the spec op guy because no one else can
Yeah,
do it for
yeah.
them. So he obviously goes in and gets that. Random one of Sue going on the charm assault to Atlantis.
So yeah. I mean, comic book context wise, and again, comic book context wise, I think going back to like Kirby and Lee, Fantastic Four, there's always been a thing between Sue and Namor from Atlantis. That
Mm.
for a long time it was love triangle esque, and he's always fancied her, and there's always been hints, and I think some stories have even kind of dipped in a little bit more of hints, but again, I think it's that blurring the moral compass lines of her going, we kind of need these guys on side. I still love my husband, even though we're morally opposed on this thing.
Just, yeah.
But I'll use the fact that he fancies me to kind of try and get him onto our side. Again, a bit of moral ambiguity there. What are people willing to do to prove that they're right, or to win a war? I guess.
Yeah. And then we
He,
get
he's
another.
by the way, he's a wanker in this, isn't he?
Yeah,
Like,
he's
and he's
absolute
always
dick.
been portrayed. Oh no, so he's always more often than not he's portrayed as a wanker, like a sovereign leader, but with a arrogant side. But yeah, he pretty much is. Well, yeah, I'll do this for you, but almost call me your Majesty.
Yeah.
And like she does, because they want to win, or they don't want to lose. I guess it's probably more than they want to win.
Yeah. We get the superhero or the supervillain turning side to go and join Cap, trying to get away from being on the good side,
Dogs on
or
the leash.
dogs off the leash sort of thing.
Yeah,
That is until Punisher fucking murders them. Had to
yeah.
have some murder.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I think again, key to the series, isn't it? Because that's the point where Cap goes no.
Yeah.
I think Cap realizes it's gone too far. It shows how far he was willing to go at this point, and it wasn't like, yeah, okay, that's what he does, and he was quite handy to us. No, he beats the shit out of him, doesn't he? And
Yeah.
makes it very clear that this is unacceptable, my boy.
Which was one of those. Was like, I knew, you just knew as soon as Punisher turns up, it was not going to end well.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Like, I will touch on the Punisher bit, because I mean that's predominantly kind of his arc
Him
done.
done. Yeah.
I thought it was really clever to have him in it, because I said about like
Yeah.
Doctor Strange not being a big part of the Marvel universe. I mean, Punisher's having his own series for quite a while before this, but at this point he's less intertwined with the rest. So the days of him appearing in issues of Spidey and Daredevil and things like that were less and less at this point. He'd kind of did. While still being published, he was kind of over there. They let Punisher do the Punisher things for the audience that like the Punisher things. And if he was
Yeah.
going to interact, it tend to interact with like kind of more the spooky side of Marvel, the the Ghost Riders and things like that. And
Or Daredevil. Or
yeah,
Deadpool even.
to
Because,
put him right plonk in the middle of a major story was a really interesting wrinkle for me, because I don't remember him being in any of the other crossovers to this point. He'd always been like,
Yeah.
we don't know what to do with him. Stick him over there.
But yeah, it's one of those. I really enjoyed him coming into it, and he doesn't change. He comes in as the Punisher and does Punisher shit.
I mean, I think the only thing that they really do go quite heavy in on this, which I don't remember them doing much of before, is leaning into that side of his soldier past. And like he effectively has joined this side, not only because of his feelings on the idea of registration and being run by the state, but more so he fucking loves Cap. Cap is his hero, and
Yeah.
like that kind of military mentality of going, I follow like the good and the great, despite all of the really horrific things he's done over his time. That's the selling point for him, is that Cap is the leader and he'll follow Cap into battle wherever he goes. I just unfortunately he will do
His
Punisher
methods.
things whilst doing it. Yeah.
Another bit I really liked that was short, Strange with the Watcher.
Yes.
And their little conversation of, you could do something about this. Why are you just watching? And that's the Watcher talking to Strange. And Strange is very much like, see how it plays out.
And again, it was that kind of like, I'm going to do what you've been doing for the last 40 years of publication. I'm just going to sit here and watch and see where we go from here at the end of it.
It's not my place to change anything. Let them have their little play.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it was good, wasn't it? I mean, every now and again, I think you see it earlier on in the series with some bits with Black Panther, and as we say with the X-Men, of going, yes, there are lines drawn, but there are some people, for whatever reason, for their own reasons, who go, no, I'm not getting involved in this. Like, and for some people, I think because the idea is that this was a petty squabble between two people. For some people, are going, it doesn't impact me, and when it doesn't impact me, I won't get involved. And for others, it's like, I don't have a side here, or I think both sides are wrong potentially.
Yeah. And then we get the epic finish
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? We build to a culmination, which is the big battle. You know, like yeah, for spoilers for when we get towards the end, but this isn't a series that kind of builds up that there are two sides and you never get that fight, and you know they just go and have dinner together instead. No, you get the big battle, and you get the big battle set at the or initially set at the prison, don't you? Cap's
Yeah,
side goes to rescue the unfairly, in their minds, prisoned heroes and villains, but you know, people who have been unfairly held by the state, as they now are.
yeah. You get the Skrull guy who
Yeah,
was
Hulkling, as that's his name from the Young Avengers. Yes,
yeah
he's a fake Pym, isn't he? There for a
yeah.
little while, and
So he gives away all the secrets so he can get them out of the prison.
but there's even little
Um,
bits there, isn't there, where they kind of go, aha, Tony Stark goes, aha, you didn't realize, like, we're here and you didn't realize we had a spy all the time. And they just kind of go, yeah, we did. It's Tigra. We've known that. We've been
yeah,
using that to feed you false information. And again, I think you get to see how these characters know each other very well and are very au fait with what people are probably going to do and how, I don't know, like for a group of friends, I think that's one of the hard parts of it, because ultimately, in theory, these are a group of friends
yeah,
um, of using people's weaknesses against them to further their own agenda.
yeah. Um, they all go off to New York City, and yeah, we get a big fuck off fight for what, an issue and a half, I think.
Yeah,
Because it
yeah. I
starts
mean,
in the end of six, doesn't it? And
yeah.
then
At the end of six, you kind of get that initial confrontation at the prison, where I guess all of the reveals are made of whose side's which, and there's a little bit there's a bit I think it's the last panel of six where it's I can't remember. I think
the
in fact
versus
I'm going to have a
screen
look.
look.
I'm going to have a look and see exactly what they say to make sure that I don't misquote it. But yeah, it's Cap going, now close your eyes, gentlemen. This might hurt, and you know the fight is on.
Yeah, because the one before that is the versus screen look
Yes, yeah,
one in it, where you got
yeah,
one side, other side.
yeah. If it was Street Fighter, something like that, it was literally kind of set up a bit of a screen like that, wasn't it? Street Fighter Turbo, where you had multi characters and things. Yeah,
But yeah, the fight, fuck me, this is beautiful.
yeah.
This is so well designed and drawn. Because usually these sort of things cannot look great when they do
It can look messy, can't it?
massive,
If you throw
massive
too
fights
much in
with
it.
lots of things going on.
Yeah,
But there are a lot of panels where there is stuff in the background that's quite small that you notice, but because how that you're always drawn to the bigger image. So whether that be Cap and Iron Man fighting at the front of the panel, you
yes,
look, there's stuff in the background as well, and
yeah.
it's stunning to
Well,
look at.
and like during this fight, you see a lot of screen time, or sorry, a lot of people getting like a little bit of screen time, and I can't think of any of them that visually didn't look really good. You know, it
Yeah,
wasn't like kind of that one's in the back a little bit, so I'll half-ass the drawing of this. You know, like very much. I imagine he intricately spent many hours. I mean, there's one where Vision takes out Iron Man, and so I'm looking at this because I actually have the panel open here where I barely remember Vision being in this series at all to this point. But I
I
look at it
think
and I
he
go,
literally only turns up for the fight
yeah.
at the end.
And I go, God damn, I want to see more of Steve McNiven drawing Vision because he draws him really bloody well. But yeah. As a piece of art or as a piece of comic book superhero art, so many of these panels, we've said before, you could put them up on your wall and you go, yep, I could look at that thousands of times and be happy. But yeah, it is very much superhero top end superhero art, isn't it?
Yeah. Um, End of the fight as Cap's about to murder Iron Man.
Oh, there is
Yeah,
before you do that, there is a great bit as well where, and again, maybe because of my proclivities and my liking one more than the other, and I think we did this in our Super Teams one, but Hercules knocks 10 bells of shit out of Robot Thor, including
Yes.
literally smashing his head open. And because Hercules is, I mean, Thor and Hercules are the two main god heroes that they have in the Marvel universe. Others have been introduced, but it was a magical moment for me because Hercules finally got to be the bigger of the two. Albeit against a robot version, but yeah, I absolutely loved it. And again, what a panel! Like it's just, again beautiful. I have it on my wall.
Yeah. So yeah, the final battle, just as Cap's about to murder Iron Man,
And he's winning,
or
isn't he? He's got
yeah,
he's got the advantage over Iron Man very much because of Vision taking Iron Man out, phasing through him. But they're kind of he is just knocking shit out of him with his shield, isn't he? Like
and
absolutely paneling him.
smashing his core where the arc reactor is.
Yeah.
And it's normal people, normal day to day
Yep.
heroes.
Yep.
Your
Yeah,
policemen,
with
your firemen,
firefighters.
your
Yeah.
CFP, you know, ambulance guys restrain him.
Yeah.
And at that point, you get that sort of look of realization of, fuck,
I
what
mean,
have we done?
he looks around, doesn't he? And again, we talk about like the visual storytelling against the written, but you know, you get panels of the devastation that these guys have just done to New York City, and the fires, the holes in the building, and I guess regardless, I think, of which side you are on to this point, I think this was designed in such a way of going, regardless of which side you're on, look, this is the upshot of potentially what this argument does, rather than who is right and who is wrong. There are consequences for this.
And yeah, it's that. I think it goes over about 2 or 3 pages. But there's no words. It's just you see the devastation that they've caused. You see that looking Cap of sort of going.
He cries. They do a tear rolling down his cheek, and again, not something you often see in the hero world. You know, it's a very, well, certainly at this time, a very machismo. Your heroes don't cry no matter how bad the situation. But yeah, you know, like Cap has this realization of, my God, look at what we've done. Look at what we've wrought here.
Yeah, and yeah, he surrenders. Cap surrenders. Team stands down, and yeah, it's just so moving visually with how well they do that whole last issue, and then you then see Tony making the mother of the dead kid.
Before we go on, like there's just a couple of bits, and I had one of the reasons why I had it open is a couple of bits from these panels that that I think are kind of really kind of relevant to, I guess, what the writer is trying to do with the story. But so after, just as Cap is thrown down his shield and he's kind of heading towards the authorities, and it's we were beating them. We were winning back there, and Cap says everything except the argument. Like, so like he's almost going, whether we are right or wrong, we are disproving our side of the argument by behaving this way. And then he says, and they're not arresting Captain America, they're arresting Steve Rogers. And again, I mean, it's a bit America fuck yeah, isn't it? Like, it's a bit like, you know, it's me that they're arresting. It's not the ideal of what I am, and people can kind of take this mantle on. But no, they're arresting me. I think it's. I think probably for me, it feels like when Mark Miller started to write this story, he had probably the concept, and I think he probably had the end, didn't he? This feels like the bit which was kind of his payoff. You know, this is. I'm going to slightly tiptoe into something that might be a spoiler for whose side, but for me, this is the point where I realised that this was a Captain America story and not a Cap versus Tony story or a whose side are you on story. I think he'd done very smartly up until this point, but you go, that's fucking Cap, isn't it? Like this was getting Cap from A to B and telling something about Cap as a person and things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, very kind of powerful Cap moments.
Yeah. As I said, the final section is Tony giving the power of Shield and control of
Yes.
Shield
Yeah.
to a non-human or to a non-hero that's not corrupt or would have a better moral compass, which I would imagine would probably make it interesting going into the future from there on out.
Well,
but
there's quite a bit, isn't there, towards the end of this, where you start to, I guess, get a bit of a fast forward in time, but they start to lay the nuggets for what's to happen for the Marvel Universe. So you see, and they've mentioned it a couple of times in here, this idea of the initiative, which is every state will have its own state-sponsored superhero team, be it a good one or a really shitty one, because there's one with the armadillo in it, and that. Some of the people that are on the pro registration side are almost kind of their fame is going to go through the roof. You know, they're making like Time magazine covers and bits like this. But also you see some of the other stuff. So like I guess what's going to happen with those that walked away from the fight but didn't walk away from the fight into becoming registered. Like you get to see Spidey is in a black costume again, something he hasn't been in since the days of the Venom introduction, and that Luke Cage and a little panel of his arm, Doctor Strange, are in a room together and probably going to carry on the underground and things like that. And spoilers, this is where Doctor Strange starts to get again a bit more relevant. And you see Cap in his everyday clothes, kind of, I guess, awaiting being taken to whatever prison he's going to be taken to. But yeah, you see some of the devastation, don't you, of like the war is over, but stuff happens after a war, and people are not only impacted physically, but they're also impacted mentally. And just because a side has ostensibly won doesn't mean that everyone agrees with it still.
Yeah. Come out of this and I'm like, I now need to get 2 to see what happens. I don't know whether 2 is a straight follow on or
no.
what.
Two is published, I think, around the time that Civil War comes out. So 2 is not a sequel, but a sequel, if that makes sense. You know, like it's got that theory point of going, there is another reason why sides are taken. And there are 2 different, well, there is different people whose side are you on. But I would don't go to 2 to get the follow up to this, because 2 is published about 10 years later.
Okay.
So the universe has moved on dramatically since then. But as I say, I think for story beats wise, they do talk about 1. You know, they do kind of go, oh, we're Civil Warring again, diddly diddly dee, that sort of thing. They don't kind of pretend it never happened. And some of the bits are based off of, I guess, concept-wise of going, haven't we done this before, and didn't we learn anything from last time, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, the sides slightly vary, and I'd say to you, avoid it, because Captain Marvel's a big character in it, and I know how much you don't really vibe with Captain Marvel. So I think the truth of it is that probably where if we touch on this stuff again, I think there's a couple of other crossovers that come later than this, which I could see us doing. I really could, and one in particular, because it is going to be a Marvel release a TV show, and I know we tend to sort of touch on those things if they are, but I think a lot of maybe what happens in between and the aftermath of this, we will flesh out in other stories, but maybe not specifically, because this stays line wide. So post this, the Marvel universe is changed. The things that you say about Shield, that's there are Shield things that happen. The Initiative happens. There's actually a monthly called Avengers the Initiative, which looks at some of the teams that come out of this, some of those 52 teams, and people. So I said about Luke Cage being in a room. There is a split in the Avengers titles at this point, and there had been during the Civil War, but there is a secret Avengers series that comes out, and this is the Avengers who are working under the radar, and there is an Avengers series that comes out, which is the public face of the Avengers, the
Yeah.
kissing the babies and shaking the hands, and the villains that we have seen in this make an appearance again, and maybe they're not so divorced from what is happening in this, and maybe there's some shield chicanery and all this sort of stuff. But yes, I think what's to come, we may well touch on when we do some of the other, well, if we do some of the other crossovers. But I think having read
Yeah.
this, it gives you an interesting groundwork of like latter events would probably make a lot less sense if you hadn't read this one.
Yeah. It's the thing, it's like I came out of this and I was like, I want to find out what happens next.
And
I'm
I
very
think it's done. I think to a large degree, then it's done its job, hasn't it? Like as a
Yeah.
crossover event, I think the big crossover is to get people into the comic book store, isn't it? And their
Yeah.
job is to then make you want to read more. And if it's captured you like that, then bravo to Mark Miller and Steve McNiven for going. They've got their claws into you.
It's definitely one of those. Also, he's another one that I'd be quite interested to see what else he's done.
Mark Miller.
And with who, and see if
So Mark Miller, I will say we will do more, and I say we'll do more because I think to a large part, a lot of our kind of joint reads so far have been again touching around the Marvel DC. Mark Miller has loads of standalone stuff outside of that as well. So he did write Kick-Ass, which became Kick-Ass the movie. He did write. Oh my God, why can't I remember what that show's called? Jupiter's Circle, which become a Netflix show and things like that. Mark Miller's he's got some big stories in the superhero worlds. So yes, I'm a big fan. I know that sometimes his stuff can be divisive because I think people think that he gets an idea in his head and won't leave it alone. But I go, well, that's what I want from a writer, isn't it? You want them to have that idea and tell their story. But I'm quite a fan of Mark Miller, and we'll touch on it more. And there is one particular story which I do have on my list of stories that we'll get to that happens pretty much straight after this, and that is what happens next for Cap. And we will we'll put it on the radar, and I'll have a look around and see availability of it. But what happens next for Cap is, I think, great. But it's part of a Cap series run, which is great. My favourite run on Cap ever, and the stuff that most of the movies are based off of. Well, other than the World War II shit, like that sort of stuff. But a lot of the stuff the movies tap into are based off of Ed Brubaker's run on Cap that starts before this, continues during this, and I think it's great. So yeah, I have got it on our list to get to at some point. So you will see what happens next for Cap, and it is quite big, dramatic, and bold, I would say.
Nice. So we will go to film.
Obviously, but quickly before we move on to film, I take it from what you said, you really enjoyed it.
Yes. I smashed through this in a couple of days. That's how much I enjoyed it.
As much as there's words in it, and I say there's words in it, it's not unwordy, but it is quite a quick read, isn't it? And I think because of that kind of cinematic element of the panels and the pace that the story moves at, the only thing that I was slightly worried, certainly going back for a reread, is, and whether this might impact your enjoyment of it, is I found that there's so much that happens with not a lot of explanation. Like it just kind of goes, and then they did this, move on, and then they did this, move on. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it was badly told in that way, but I know that so many of the beats in between. So like Peter, let's say, turning on Tony, or his dissatisfaction with maybe what Tony's offering, is fleshed out so much more in Iron Man and Spider-Man that I don't think it wasn't there in this, but because they do so much around it, there were some points where I was just a little bit worried that you might go, I felt like it could have lingered on that or explained that a little bit better. But I'm really glad you enjoyed it, because I do think it is a good standalone piece as well.
It's the thing, there's bits in there that, as you say, they could have done more with that, and more with with Spider and Pete, Spider and Tony. They could have done more with the Fantastic Four, stuff being at odds with each other. there were lots of bits that did go through quickly, but at the same point, I knew that this is 250 pages
Yeah,
for a story.
yeah,
There's only so much space and time. Sometimes shit,
yeah.
just go with it. So
I mean,
unless it was getting
it's the action movie, isn't it? But it's
yeah,
the action movie, I think, with a bit more smarts behind it than a traditional, typical, you know. It, this is a clever action movie rather than a dumb one. But yes, there is a lot more nuance and story that are there if you want to. Now, I will say, I mean, I read a lot of the tie-ins at the time, and don't get me wrong, some of them aren't very good because they're all
yeah,
written by the writers of the comic books at the time. So it matches the talent of the writer. So I'm not saying everything that surrounded this was brilliant, but certainly it fleshed stuff out more. But yeah, I'm a fan of it as well. I think it's comic book crossovers, and we will do a few of them along the way. And my God, there's a point when I was actually reading comics where I was burnt out of crossovers, and I never wanted to see one again. But there are certain ones that I think really stand out for me, and this is one of the ones that stands out for me because I think it actually has a story and a message, whereas
yeah.
a lot of them don't have a message or don't have a basis other than wouldn't it be cool to see? And I think this is distinctive for that reason.
Yeah, it's something of like you can have these event things that, as you say, have a purpose, have a meaning, have a reason, and actually make changes
Yeah,
going forward. Or you can have, as we've said previously, we've got the bit that, or how Avengers sort of really was at the beginning. Oh shit, we've got a big bad that we can't take out on our own. Let's get the gang together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And those ones are wonderful in their own ways, but they're not, the sort of stories
Yeah,
that will stay with you
yeah,
and
that'll make you think
make
afterwards.
you
You know,
think.
look, we're
Yeah,
going to come to that. Whose side are you on after we've done the movie? But I mean, it was a great marketing campaign. You know, like when it was coming out or before it was coming out, you would see a poster and it would be Cap's face, Iron Man's face. Whose side are you on? It would be Sue Storm, Reed Richards. Whose side are you on? And
yeah.
yeah, it was a great marketing tool as well.
So with the film, so as we said earlier, one of the big changes is what causes
Yeah,
the tension, because of it being MCU, and they had to play in that sandbox.
yeah.
The one that we get is Bucky and the
Well, it's
Sokovia incident.
yeah, yeah. You know, like Wanda's mistake, as it
Yeah,
was initially kind of put as, and really was shown as Wanda's mistake, wasn't it? Although I to this day am not really sure what else she was going to do with that bomb. It was going to kill people anyway. I think that's maybe something where we talk about the movies. I felt the movie was a little bit less brave in going a bad thing happened. I
yeah.
think the movie wanted. I felt
It,
like with the movie, by doing that and by doing the Bucky incident, that which wasn't kind of Bucky effectively, it tiptoed a lot more into we don't really want to make either of these look worse than the other because they're the heroes. Whereas I felt the
yeah,
comic book was more happy to go, no, this is what this person thinks and this is what this person thinks. You figure it out. Like
yeah. But it's that thing of still giving that look at the carnage and the devastation that your behaviour causes.
yeah,
Um, but what was it? Six. I think 6 people die
yeah,
in
yeah.
in Nigeria.
and
Not
and and
600
no
kids.
school kids from what I can
Yeah,
tell. Yeah,
yeah. It was an office building.
yeah,
There
yeah.
aren't going to be kids in there.
It's fucking office workers. Who cares? They're all just numbers anyway.
But yeah, so that's obviously the main sort of difference on the setup. Um, Obviously, it still tells it in a really good way of Tony being handed the letter after the lecture of
Yeah.
my son is dead because of you,
Yes.
and that being that moment where he goes fuck,
those kind of story beats are there, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, like they don't take the comic book, tear it up, and go, "Oh, we just like the name." You know, that they do follow those beats, don't they? And the sides are like ostensibly very similar as well, although obviously a lot smaller cast because they're playing with MCU characters and the ones that they had paid to come in and do this movie. So some characters will not take a side because they had to limit the budget, I guess, to a degree for this. So yeah.
Yeah, so obviously this the main one for this was obviously this at the time was the first spotting of Spidey in the
It
MCU.
was, wasn't it? It's hard to remember now because obviously he's so integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this was Spidey, and Spidey was owned by rights was owned by another company. We'll never see Spidey in the Marvel cinema. Well, you know, we'd never see Spidey. We'd never see the X-Men. We'd never see Fantastic Four. We'd never see any of these concept characters that were
Are owned by
actually
Fox or
yeah,
Sony, and
yeah. So I mean, that was a real significant thing. And I know it's jumping ahead, but bloody brilliant Spidey as well, wasn't it?
yeah,
And in a Cap movie. So as much as I said, like towards the end of the comic, I come to the realization that this was a Cap story. In the movie, I kind of went, yeah, this is a Cap movie, but actually, it moves the cinematic universe forward a lot more than just any other singular Cap movie or any other singular hero movie
yeah,
does, I think.
yeah. This is the one that is there with the Avengers titles for
Yeah.
actually moving and being a conduit of everything that has been going on. Because
You know, I
everything
said
else has
earlier,
been standalone, but had a little something that would then pay off in one of the group ones or in someone else's.
yeah,
This was the first one other than an Avengers film that was like, no, shit happens here and it means something.
well,
For
and you know, I said earlier about how I guess I was surprised to see this come as a Captain America Civil War, and I think that's because, and I'm pointing down, like this was a massive crossover, and I thought if they ever did this, it would be Avengers Civil War, or it would be
yeah,
Civil War, and it wouldn't be here's Captain America Civil War. So yeah, it was kind of a real seed change from that. You know, like I think the pomp and circumstance. I mean, I love. How do you feel about the Civil War movie? Are you a fan of it? Not a fan of
it's
it?
my favorite non-Avengers or for Ragnarok. That
Well,
obviously with my top of Marvel ones, the Avengers ones are there, and so is Ragnarok and Guardians. But that is like of all of the solo ones, because it's not really a solo one. It's my favorite of all of them.
I mean, for me, the pinnacle's Winter Soldier. I love that movie. I think that is the best Marvel movie, full stop. But weird enough, I think when I watched Civil War when it first came out, again, bearing in mind comic book context, bearing in mind loving Winter Soldier, I I liked it when I watched
Yeah,
it in the cinema, but I kind of went, okay, they did a decent job. I must admit, it's the one that the more I've watched of it, and I have watched it a number of times, every time I watch it, I like it more and more and more, and it moves up the rankings higher and higher. And I think it is kind of it sits behind Winter Soldier, Ragnarok, and Guardians. But like when I say sits behind them, it sits very snugly together with them on a four-person sofa, and they all have cuddle each other every now and again and tell each other how good a movie they are. I do. I think it's great. I think it's a great way of telling this, which is I'll say a complicated story in the comic books because of its interweaving with lots of characters that don't exist in the movie world, and to do
yeah.
that in a singular movie and to do it in the time they've got. I mean, Marvel movie runtimes are getting up at this point, but this isn't a 4 or 5 hour jobby, is it? You know, like it has a longish runtime, but it doesn't overstay its welcome.
I think it's only just over 2 hours. It's
Yeah.
still not at that point where they're doing the mammoth
God, I've seen
3 hours.
lots of movies do a lot less in a lot more time than this.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the film banging and awesome.
But again, I mean, it
But
leans into, doesn't it? It has the registration, doesn't it? You know, that's
yeah,
kind of, I guess, its core conceit of confrontation. Now, I think probably what the movie does add in is it adds in the Bucky element, doesn't it? You know, there is for Cap, it's not only about what is right and wrong, but one of his friends, his oldest and best friend, is potentially going to be mistreated, and I think they add in a kind of guilty before being proven elsewhere in here. So I think it kind of does add that wrinkle in that I don't think we get in the comic book one, which I guess because it's a cap story, maybe that's why it kind of leans into that a little bit more. And there's a little bit more villainy that runs behind it, isn't it? There's some villainous decisions that lead to some of the key things happening, rather than the comic book not having the reveal of "it was me all the time." It was Doctor Doom. I almost go back to Doctor Doom.
Yeah, they said the film. I think because of how the film is done and who the audience is for, or who it's for, it needed to have at least someone to be the antagonist, which is obviously Russian boy with his, magic book of Russian words to fire up Bucky. Where the comic doesn't need that, because the point is the dead children.
Yeah.
If they'd have killed 600 kids at the beginning of Civil War, the film, you can get away with not having the Bucky element. But because they needed Bucky in it and they needed the antagonist, that's why we got Russian fellow and trying to unlock the evil.
I guess in the comic book world at this point, Marvel are rising up a little bit. The movies have started to come out, and comics are starting to sell a little bit better again. But to a degree, Mark Miller probably just went, "Fuck the ambiguity. I don't care. Like, I'm here to sell comics, so that I'll kill kids to sell comics." And again, the audience can decide afterwards. Whereas, I think, in truth, the cinematic universe. I mean, maybe if Civil War was made now, or maybe if it was made in 5 years' time, I think there would be less precious about that as a storyline. Like even when they blow up the United Nations bit and it's Black Panther's dad that dies, it doesn't it kind of leans into that rather than going, here are 500 innocent people. There was a group of school kids doing a tour. Because I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe are still very precious, or at that point, much more precious, are going, all of our heroes need to be heroes. Less likely to commit that actually they're human beings and they might make mistakes and things like that, and leaning into that side. And I think that's where the comic book has a bit of strength for me over the movie, is that you can tell a lot harder story on this of going, no, bad shit happened. And this is what happens after bad shit happens. Whereas I think the movies are a bit more tied into the, come on, we're all good, really, aren't we? And some of this was a mishap, and some of this was because a bad guy lent you down this road. And actually, would you have really fought each other if you didn't have this? Whereas the comic book is that no, like after 20 plus years of these people working together, there's an issue here that they don't agree on, and and they dig their heels in. But yeah, I mean, a great movie for me. Unfortunately, slightly undone some of its great bits with what happens next in Falcon and Winter Soldier with Zemo, who's the villain in this. I did think that it was dramatically different to what Zemo's motivations are in the comics, but I thought a very interesting motivation that they decided to jettison straight down the toilet when they wanted him to do some cool dance moves in an episode. But yeah, I mean, I look at it and I go, we'll get to this in a minute, but I felt like, and we will get to this in a minute, we'll go into whose side you're on, but I felt like when I watched the movie, it was very clear whose side I was supposed to be on. However, I say that, and this is interesting and I wish I'd looked it up, but there is a point where we do this on the Renaissance Men. We do a Civil War movie and we talk about whose side we are on. And partially it was because I had always assumed that everyone who watched this movie would be on one side rather than the other. And I just said it on our WhatsApp group randomly. And I found out that one person wasn't on the side I thought they'd be on. And then I found another person wasn't. And then I put it on our Facebook group, and I found that lots of people weren't on the side that I thought they'd be on. And you know, like I think from the comic book again, similar sort of stuff of going, like there's a side maybe more than anything else. And I think it makes for very interesting. I think that's where the movie and the comic book really stand out for me. Is it asks questions of people, and I'm not saying. I mean, clearly I've got an idea of what's right and wrong. We all have our own ideas of what's right and wrong. But I think sometimes getting people to even ask that question themselves is a really powerful tool, because we don't, do we? You know, quite often people hide away from real world issues and they put themselves into the, you know, I'd rather just watch, I mean, I'm trying to remember what, First Dates. And I'd rather watch two random people, silly people having a silly date, and then because I don't really want to maybe think about like some of the bad stuff in the world, or some of the stuff in the world and where I stand on it. Whereas I think these are interesting and important because I think they almost surreptitiously make you take a stance in what your politics would be or what your opinion would be, but do it in a really good stealth way. So yeah, but big fan of both for me.
So it is time. Choose your side.
Whose side are
you on?
Do we want to? Okay. Do we want to just go? Whose side are we on?
Yes.
So you go first.
Team Iron Man.
What?
Team
and see,
Iron
that's
Man.
the bit, and that's the bit that shocks me because, you know, as I said, for me, there's no side but Team Cap, and there's never been any side, comic book and movie. There is no side but Team Cap, and I thought that every other human being on the planet was Team Cap until I asked the question and I heard that people were Team Iron Man, and I still, having reread it again and having rewatched it again several times recently, I cannot fathom a universe where anyone is not Team Cap. It just amazes me that people aren't Team Cap. And that's why I thought it would be really interesting to see whether you would be, because if you'd have asked me to put money on it, I'd have said Team Cap for you.
See, you know, I have some ownership for the shit that they do. And Cap realizes that at the end of this. He realizes that he's wrong.
No, he doesn't. He realizes they've gone too far in the fight, but the fight is what is still important. Cap does not change his mind. Cap just goes, we cannot win this argument this way. We cannot win by fighting this. And that's what, and I say that's what it is for me. That ending for me is Cap going, I'm going to surrender. As much as we are right, proving we are right is causing the damage that we shouldn't be trying to cause. That's how I see Cap at the end there. Not Cap admitting that Iron Man was right in the slightest. Because Iron Man is absolutely, fundamentally wrong.
Well, he's a warmonger and he causes all of it.
Yeah.
But
was there any difference for you? So do you find that one side is more compelling to you than the other, comic book or movie? Or did you find pretty much you sort of snugly went into whichever camp in both of them?
I'm the same camp in both. I was reading it post the thing. I was like, let's see if it changes my mind on it. But yeah, no, I'm Team Iron Man with the whole sort of, be responsible for the shit that you cause.
Until I reread it, if you'd have asked me, I'd have said the movie is designed 100% for you to take Team Cap's side. That's what I feel like the movie is designed to do. And I think
it is.
And again, I think that's the interesting part of it, isn't it? But
looking at it as the film, Cap's the aggressor. Cap and Bucky are doing the wrong. They are the ones that are causing mayhem. They're the ones that start the fight. Everything is because of stuff that is happening to Bucky. And instead of just sort of going, right, let's work together and sort out that, he would rather just defend his friend than actually do the issues that are needing to be done at the time.
I'll come back to that. I will. I promise. I just wanted to say, like, as much as I thought the film was designed to do that, in my head I thought the comic book was closer, and I thought the comic book lent into my personal politics, like as in I was putting my personal politics on it. Whereas when I went and read back and read the comic book, now I've changed my opinion, and I think the comic book is even more written as Team Cat fuckos, and Mark Miller wrote it like it's Team Cat fuckos. Now I've read interviews, and he's never said one side rather than the other, but I read it as this is Mark Miller saying Cap is right, Tony is wrong. That Tony has arguments that have some validity, but Tony is wrong. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to kind of get that point of going. At one point, if you'd have asked me, the movie is much more blatant than the comic book is. But now, having reread the comic, I think the comic's even more blatant. But so let's get back to that then. So you say Cap is wrong and the aggressor. No, he isn't. Where is he aggressive and where is he wrong? What does he do that is aggressive other than support an innocent man who is innocent from being railroaded by a right-wing authoritarian police state that doesn't want to allow people their fair day in court?
But they wanted to take him to court. That's the thing.
No, he'd already been judged. He was already guilty. He'd been judged in a court of popular opinion. They all assumed he was guilty. They weren't saying in their mind there was no way that he was innocent, and they were going to take him down hard because of this bad thing that he had done. And yes, I'm sure Tony and the others would, if you asked them, say he would get his day in court. But we are living in a world where your day in court isn't necessarily your day in court. It's the court of public opinion. And Cap knew in his heart, and I think this is Cap's mistake in the movie, is that Bucky didn't do it. But I think, to be honest, it didn't matter to Cap necessarily whether Bucky did it or not. Cap is there for the, oh my God, I'm going to go Team America, fuck yeah. But truth and justice. Because that is the point, isn't it? Like these guys, and here we go, we're going to go deep, Chris. These guys sacrifice their own safety in their life to help others. I would not want to be regulated by a government body that I don't trust. Why should they trust the American government? Why should they trust SHIELD? Why would they give up all those information that things could hurt their loved ones because they've tried to do something good and positive for the world to a government agency that government agency has no more, I say right, that's probably the wrong word, has shown no more proclivities to being more honest and better than the heroes themselves.
Though at the point where this is, obviously they don't have to go and give their secret identities out to everyone. You know, the whole point isn't they don't have to unmask. But SHIELD already knows who these are. SHIELD knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. SHIELD knows...
SHIELD doesn't know Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Tony knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and arguably that means SHIELD would know, but... No, Peter Parker's a kid living in New York, doing stupid things on YouTube at this point, not wanting his aunt to get hurt. And
that's in the film, but I meant in like.
Oh no, in the comic books, no, they don't know. They don't know he's Peter Parker. No one knows he's Peter Parker. Well, about 3 people in the universe know he's Peter Parker, and he doesn't want anyone to know. Nick Fury knows he's Peter Parker and has kept that secret from SHIELD. You know, that sort of thing.
But isn't that what SHIELD? In theory, is a registration of knowing superheroes.
No. Shield are the FBI, the CIA, all wrapped into one, getting into that. And do you trust government agencies implicitly? Do you want Do you want a Human Being Registration Act? Do you want a government body that you may or may not have voted in to have all of your personal details about everything you do?
That's the NHS.
For your purpose of your health, but do you want a registration card? Do you want for you to be a free walking around citizen in this country right now to have to register with the government and give them all of your details and give up the freedom of being able to pick and choose what details you want to give?
No, but that's what the superhuman. I'm not a hero. I'm not.
That's what the Superhuman Registration Act is.
But then, are they not in theory, a police force? You want all your police officers to be registered and held accountable for what they do if they do
It's
wrong.
different. It's different. The police force is a government-sponsored tool. The police force is there, and like I do want a police force. I'm not going to say I don't. I do want a police force. Whether I love everything that the police do or not, I think having some sort of policing system is. But every police officer chooses to become a police officer knowing that this is the way that they would do it. However, if they go out at night solving crimes, they're not doing it under the guise of the police, then, are they? They're voluntarily doing something, and should they have to register? No, not for me. I think fundamentally, and this is why it always amazes me. I'm shocked. I am shocked when someone says Team Iron Man. Now, can I quickly step away from probably the serious bit that we're talking about and just touch on one of the other reasons why I'm shocked that it's Team Iron Man? Team Iron Man's a cunt.
Yes.
And fundamentally, this is why I think it's always designed against him, is that, and certainly in the cinematic universe, is I cannot understand why anyone would join Team Iron Man. I think one person said on the show, and it might have been Stu, because he's got all, no, I think it was Jimmy actually, he's got all the money, so you'd live a much nicer life on his side. And I was like, well, that says a lot about you, but I do understand it. But Iron Man's horrible. Iron Man's an arrogant futurist dick who has already shown in the cinematic universe, less so in the comics universe at this point, but it comes, that he will take massive risks with the human race to try and forward something that he thinks is a good idea and will not waver from it, like superhuman registration, for example. And this is why I always read it, certainly, as I say, in the comic book, even more stark of, so what do they do in the comic book? They show Iron Man at the beginning, I think, with a bit of a sympathetic side of having that conversation with the mother of the dead child. And, okay, you might go, superhuman registration, I can see the idea of it, although I think it's a conversation rather than a government-pushed thing. It's a conversation. And then you go to creating robot clones of your friends to force your agenda, creating supermax prisons to put people in when they don't comply with what you want, to making state-sponsored police forces all around the country that will be under the control of ostensibly you. And these are quite fascisty things. And I think they actually show Tony Stark as being a bit of a fascist. And that's why I can never understand why anyone takes Tony's side. And as I say, he's a cunt as well, which doesn't help.
Fuck you! You're changing my mind now. I'm actually sort of seeing it that way. I was going more with that. They're right that they should be held accountable for the shit that they do.
See, I'm going to say though, I don't disagree with that. I think they should be held accountable, but they should be held accountable. So if I am, and God, because I'm not trying to, but like I don't see how they're not accountable now. So if Spider-Man's secret identity goes and kills someone, the heroes or someone will come and get Spider. You don't need to know his name to make him accountable, but you'd need to catch him like you would any criminal if they do something bad. So they are all accountable for what they do, but potentially you just don't know who they are. So in effect, oh God, here we go, going down the line again. In effect, what you are creating is you are taking people with powers, in this case, people with powers, and you are making them into a police force for either the American government, or you're making them into a police force for an agency such as S.H.I.E.L.D. or for Tony. And why would I trust? Let's look at recent times. Would I trust a 52 superhero teams run by Donald Trump?
No.
And that's what you're signing up for with the Superhuman Registration Act.
Yes.
And that's why I think fundamentally it's wrong. Now, do I think the Cap side leaned into naivety? Yes, I do. And do I think in the movie more than the comic books. I think in the movie, yes, I think they do. His loyalty to Bucky muddies the waters enough to give Tony's side a bit of a chance for me. But let's not be under any illusions. Tony is wrong. Bucky didn't do it. The end. Like, he's wrong. And he pushes this off an agenda that is wrong. They create this because of something that didn't actually happen. A perception of what should be done because someone went off the grid and did this. No, he didn't. A bad guy did it. And is there going to be a Villains Registration Act? Well, they ain't going to register, are they? Because they wouldn't register now unless, going back to the comic book world, they register because they suddenly go, oh, nom, 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 nom. Here's a load of government money that I'll get my grubby little mitts onto, and I can do some of the shitty things I want to do, but done off the back of having a card that says I'm allowed to do it all of a sudden. But yeah, sorry, I know I'm going to shut up for a little while and let you talk because I know I've witted on, but yeah, that's but I think potentially that's your own political proclivities will
See, now
temper how you read the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excuse me. How you've just done that as I hadn't sort of joined the dots of actually yes, they are just making a Nazi party.
And don't get me wrong, you mean for watchers of the Renaissance men, you know that like any chance we can drop Hitler or a Nazi into a conversation we're going to, and I know that's a massive leap away, and it's almost that horrible thing that I think has become a modern part of argument of if you compare it to Hitler, you win. But I think there are, I mean, as I say, I know it's a way down the line, but these are kind of very, very authoritarian and totalitarian kind of ways of ruling a people, which I guess I'm not comfortable with, even though I'm a rule follower.
It is very much what could then lead into V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's when you put it the way that you have, it's like actually I hadn't sort of gone and connected the dots to where it then goes.
Don't fool yourself, mate. It's when I pointed out that Iron Man's a cunt, and you realise, yeah, I don't want to go on the side of the absolute twat bag.
Fucking prick.
but yeah, I mean, there's a degree, isn't there, of going. We live in a world full of rules, and we live in a world full of rules, and we live in a world where there are armies, there are police forces, there are systems built in to kind of keep order. And I think when I signed up in my head for a world full of superheroes, I kind of signed up going, the superheroes are ostensibly good, and actually they're doing things that I don't know I'd be willing to do. I don't know whether I'd like Peter Parker. I don't know whether I'd be willing to risk my family to do good for strangers. I don't know whether I would, and take the kickings that he's taken in the years and stuff like that. So thank God for having him. And I think I kind of, not that I believe in God, but yeah, I think I always like lean into it when I see those sort of stories and go, but why would we fuck him off? Why would we make him do something? Why would we make him do this? Because he's doing all those good things. And yes, should his actions have consequences? Yes, but I think they do. And I think maybe that's where I differ of going, I don't see how registering them makes them any more responsible for their actions. Like, it's just a prison in a shitty place that they can now be put in. But there's always been prisons in shitty places that they could have been put in if they did a bad thing.
True. So, viewers, where do you sit? Have you come into this with the mindset that I did? That Iron Man was right, and then had it changed by Seddon and his fight for Cap?
Well, not his fight for Cap. He's using the Nazi card to try and win an argument again. You wait. Next week we'll be reviewing My Little Pony, where if Chris doesn't agree with me, I will compare one of the My Little Pony, I don't know the names of any of them, to a Nazi to try and win an argument.
Yeah, so like, subscribe, rate, and comments. We want comments.
We would really, I mean, we want comments anyway, but on this one, we would love to hear from you guys and hear, primarily what you think of it, whether you've read it, whether you've just watched it, but whose side are you on? Because I do, as much as, like, I said about the side that I think is right and wrong, but let's be honest, like, that none of them are killers or anything like that. But I think the thing that's interesting is to read why people think who is right, but also that the power of the story is that people think, and I think that's a great thing, isn't it? Like, when we'll do some trashy stuff on this, we'll do some great stuff, and luckily I think for the most part we've been doing stuff we've really liked so far. But isn't that what we really want out of kind of entertainment, movies, comics, and things like that? Is something that talks to us as a reader and maybe leads us down a certain path. Yeah.
So next week we're doing the completely fucking opposite. Top 5 awful films.
Awful, and you know, this is this is a tough top 5, people, because there's some stinkers out there, and I think there will be moments where I'll bitterly regret my top 5 as I'm reminded of something else that sucks. But yeah, we've done a lot of positive top 5s, and we really wanted to scratch that itch, didn't we? Of going, let's talk about some bollocks, let's talk about some really crap stuff to try and help you to either avoid it or to go, I really fancy watching something rubbish. Brilliant, I've got something to watch now.
Yes. So until next time, like, subscribe, ring bell, comments. Definite fucking comments. And see you
Oh,
next
and
week.
sorry,
Oh,
I know you're
yes.
saying it, but I will flash something up of comment on the video would be great, but also we'll put our Twitter up because we are starting to use it, and
Yes.
so and obviously, you know, we quite happily have further discussions via Twitter on that as well. So I'll flash that up for anyone who wants to kind of join us and have further discussions with us on this topic or any of our shows via that.
Yes. And until next week, and some shit films.
Thanks for watching, and just remember, you can join the Cult of Egg by liking and subscribing to this YouTube channel. We release regular content where we talk about all things geek, all things pop culture, and all things that we're interested in. You can also come along and join the discussion on Facebook groups and Renaissance Cast. And you can join us on our Twitch channel where Stu regularly streams games. And if you'd like to support us, then please follow the link for the Patreon. Thanks very much.